What is up, guys? My name is Jack O'Brien and welcome back to Interesthings. Global warming is a topic that is never pleasant to discuss. Some people are still skeptical, while 97% of climate scientists agree that it is real. Despite the senseless debate, climate change is real, and more so than just being real, it's getting worse, and we've just reached a critical point in climate change. September is usually the month that has the lowest CO2 levels in the atmosphere. This is because many plants have absorbed lots of CO2 over spring and summer, and by the time you get to September, all that CO2 that was in the atmosphere has been absorbed by the plants that were growing over the past 2 seasons. September was still the month with the lowest amount of CO2. However, the amount of CO2 that was in the atmosphere was over 400 ppm, which means 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is a critical change. What does this mean? Well, essentially what this means is we will not be seeing CO2 levels below 400 ppm likely anytime in the near future. What this means is that the climate is definitely going to start changing and in more noticeable ways than before. Safe levels of CO2 in the atmosphere are generally considered to be 350 parts per million. We have long since passed that point and there is no return in sight. The climate is about to change as we pass the 400 ppm benchmark with no end in sight. This is bad, and we should do something about this. We have to do something about this, and we are. Beijing is the most notable city for air pollution. Residents can't even see the sun most of the time, and that's why there is a smog-sucking tower coming to Beijing. This is the first of its size, and essentially what this tower does is it sucks in dirty air and filters it out to make it 75% cleaner. While this is not a fix per se, it is still a good start to cleaning up the mess that we have made. The main issue with climate change is that we are pumping out more CO2 than we are taking back in. Great, so let's just start pulling back CO2 and everything will be fine again, right? Well, this is actually what a group of German researchers are trying to do. By planting millions of acres of Barbados, a plant that grows in desert climates, we could potentially take back in massive amounts of CO2. And this is a great idea too, because if the carbon cycle is a cycle, then that means that if we're putting out too much, the answer is just to pull it back in. We can do this, the only issue is finding the ways to do this. Planting acres of Barbados plants seems like a good start, and it's also a good idea that we're using natural processes instead of just new technological advances in order to try and clean up the atmosphere. We will likely use both new technologies as well as natural methods in order to remove excess CO2 from the atmosphere in the future. Some of the less natural ways to reduce the impacts of climate change include sucking the CO2 back up with man-made technologies, and even using aerosols to spray into the atmosphere to actually lower the Earth's temperature so it actually doesn't heat up. Both of these ideas are still far-fetched, and while we could spray aerosols into the atmosphere, we would need to do extensive research on what the consequences might be. And as for sucking the CO2 back up, we currently do not have technology that is able to do this as efficiently as plants. So, for the time being, we will be sticking with plants for this method. We are also looking into using drones in order to seed clouds to produce more rainfall. While these drones are able to produce clouds that in turn produce rain, the chemicals that are used in order to seed these clouds are not entirely safe for humans. In order to seed the clouds, silver iodine is used, which at high doses is not safe for humans. Other ways that we have learned to cope with climate change is by developing new farming techniques. One in particular uses only sunlight and seawater to grow tomatoes in the South Australian desert. The salt water is desalinated, and the desalination plant is powered by solar panels. This solar panel farm provides energy for the entire farm. The desalinated water is then used to grow the tomatoes, while leftover salt water is used to wet cardboard. These pieces of cardboard are then used to line the inside of the growing room in order to keep the overall temperatures lower. This method of wetting the cardboard with salt water allows for the internal temperatures of the grow room to be much less than the outside hot desert. In turn, this allows for things to be grown that otherwise would never be able to be grown in such a desertous climate. As climate change and rising global temperatures continue to reshape our world, humanity will have to look at new ways to survive, as well as new ways to reverse the effects of climate change. What do you guys think about the new ways that humanity will have to adapt in order to cope with climate change? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.